You're about to hear something your mind has been sensing for years, but never had the language to articulate. Not a belief, not a philosophy, not a motivational push, but a fundamental shift in how reality actually responds to you. A shift so subtle it hides in plain sight, woven into your everyday moments when you wake up, when you react, when you think no one is watching, including you. Because the truth is this: reality is not waiting for your actions. Reality is waiting for your observation. The moment you look at something, truly look at it with awareness instead of habit, you change its behavior, you alter the path it takes, you reorganize the possibilities that surround it, you collapse everything it could be into what it must become for you. But here's the part most people never realize. You're not just observing the world is observing you observing it. Think of your day like a mirror maze. Every thought, every micro-reaction, every assumption is a beam of light bouncing, splitting, returning back to you with amplified force. You think you're casually noticing life, but you're actually commanding it, quietly, invisibly, relentlessly. Most people live as accidental observers. You're about to become a deliberate one, because there's a specific internal position, a shift of attention so small you could miss it, that flips reality from random to responsive. When you rest your awareness inside that position, life stops behaving like a storm and starts behaving like a script you didn't write with effort, but with perception. This is the paradox at the root of everything. You don't shape reality by trying to change it. You shape reality by changing the place within you from which you see it. When your awareness is scattered, life feels scattered. When your awareness is reactive, life feels hostile. When your awareness is unconscious, life moves without you. But when your awareness becomes still, everything around you reorganizes itself, slowly at first, then suddenly, then undeniably. Because reality is not responding to who you think you are. It's responding to where your consciousness is positioned in this moment. This is the mechanism hidden behind ancient wisdom, spiritual teachings, quantum experiments, and even the quiet realizations that hit you in moments of silence. A single understanding that dissolves the illusion of effort and exposes the truth. You are not in reality. Reality is inside your observation. And once you see this, really see it, nothing in your life can continue the way it has been. Not your identity, not your suffering, not your limitations, not your patterns, not your possibilities. Because the moment you shift the observer, the observed must follow. There is a moment, so brief, so silent, where reality hesitates. A pause so small that your normal mind never notices it, yet everything you experience is born inside that gap. It's the space between a thought and the world, between perception and projection, between what is happening and what you think is happening. That gap is where your power lives. Because before reality expresses itself outwardly, it first consults the place where your awareness is resting, not your words, not your desires, not your logic, your awareness. Every event in your life, from the smallest irritation to the biggest turning point, passes through this inner gateway. And the gateway does not ask, is this good? Is this bad? Is this fair? It only asks, where is the observer right now? If the observer in you is anxious, the world arranges itself around tension. If the observer is scattered, life breaks into fragments. If the observer is asleep, the world moves without asking permission. But when the observer becomes centered, even for a second, reality begins to soften. Its edges rearrange. The randomness dissolves. What once looked like chaos starts behaving like choreography. This is why people chase control and never find it. Control was never out there. The true lever was always in here, the inner stance from which you are seeing. Your observation acts like a tuning fork. It hums a frequency. Reality harmonizes, not metaphorically, literally. This is the hidden architecture of experience. You do not meet the world directly. You meet the reflection your awareness produces. When your perception sharpens, possibilities expand. When your perception contracts, life narrows. When your perception changes direction, events shift with it. And once you understand this, the entire illusion collapses. You were never reacting to life. You were always reacting to your own observation of life, which means the real question is not, what should I do? But, from where within myself am I observing right now? Because when the observer shifts, reality follows like a shadow without a choice. The ancient mystics hinted at this. Modern physics stumbled onto it. Your deepest intuition already knows it. Reality is not a fixed stage. It's a responsive field that bends around the consciousness looking at it. And the moment you learn to reposition the observer, even slightly, you unlock something people spend lifetimes chasing. Not the power to change the world, but the power to change the lens that the world must obey. There is a truth hidden beneath every identity you've ever worn. Personality has been drowning it out your entire life. It's the truth that you are not the character you've been playing. You are the space in which the character appears. Your thoughts, emotions, impulses, stories, they behave like actors on a stage. They speak, they argue, they panic, they celebrate. But none of them are the one who is watching. None of them are the one who is aware. And here is the secret most people never see. The observer in you is not a part of your mind. It is the position from which your mind itself is seen. This observer has no story, no fear, no ambition, no past, no future. It simply is. And because it is formless, it can slip into any form. Because it is silent, it can shape any sound. Because it is unbounded, it can influence anything that believes itself to be bound. Every limitation in your life comes from confusing the actor with the observer. You think you're the voice worrying about money. You think you're the emotion scared of judgment. You think you're the narrative repeating old pain. But you're not. You're the one who knows these things are happening. And the moment you realize this, something extraordinary occurs. Your life stops being a chain of reactions. It becomes a field of choices. Because the actor is limited. But the awareness watching the actor, limitless, untouched, unbreakable. This is why the world responds to observation. Because the observer is the one place within you that is not controlled by the world. It is the only part of you that cannot be manipulated, cannot be threatened, cannot be conditioned. Your identity changes. Your emotions shift. Your beliefs evolve. But the observer remains the same, the still point behind every moment of your life. And when your awareness rests in that still point, something subtle but powerful starts happening in your external reality. Situations you once fought with begin to resolve themselves. People who felt heavy begin to fade. Patterns you thought were you begin to collapse. Life stops pushing against you and starts rearranging around you. Why? Because the world reacts to the level of consciousness you're observing it from. When you watch reality from fear, it becomes threatening. When you watch from survival, it becomes harsh. When you watch from lack, it becomes insufficient. But when you watch from the observer, the true, spacious witness, the world becomes fluid, bendable, cooperative. This is the identity you were meant to remember. You are not the storm. You are the sky that watches it. And once you shift into that sky, the storm loses its power instantly. In the next section, you'll see how this observer, your true position, interacts with the larger field reality emerges from, and why even the smallest shift of awareness creates massive external changes. There is a point where your inner world and the outer world stop being two separate things. A point where the boundary between you and everything else quietly dissolves, revealing a truth that has always been present beneath the surface. Reality is not happening to you. Reality is happening through you. Most people never notice this because they believe the world is solid, fixed, independent, a heavy machine grinding forward with no concern for their inner state. But look closer. Look carefully. Watch how events arrange themselves around your emotional climate. Watch how opportunities appear when your internal field opens and disappear when it contracts. Watch how certain people show up only when you shift into a specific inner position. This is not coincidence. This is resonance. You exist inside a field, a vast, intelligent, responsive field that reflects the quality of the observer who is looking at it. It does not respond to your desperation, your wanting, your craving, your forcing. It responds to your state. Every state carries a signature. Every signature vibrates through the field, and the field reorganizes itself accordingly. When you feel fragmented, life breaks apart. When you feel uncertain, the world becomes unstable. When you feel powerless, the field collapses around limitation. But when you drop into the stillness of the observer, into that quiet, aware presence, the entire field shifts its texture. You'll notice it first in small ways. Conversations flow smoother, obstacles soften, timing becomes precise, coincidences turn into patterns. It feels like life has started to cooperate with you, but the truth is deeper. Life isn't cooperating. It's echoing you. Everything you experience externally is a translation of the internal frequency you're anchored in. Not the emotions passing through you, those are temporary. Not the thoughts firing across your mind, those are surface noise. But the deeper tone underneath you, the observer's position, the level of consciousness from which you're seeing, that tone is what the field listens to. That tone is what the universe mirrors back. That tone is what shapes the trajectory of events. This is why trying harder rarely works. Force disrupts the field. Fear distorts the field. Overthinking scatters it. The field doesn't respond to effort. It responds to alignment. And alignment happens only when your awareness settles into its true position. The observer, not the character. The witness, not the story. The consciousness, not the noise. In that state, reality begins to feel strangely soft, malleable, almost as if the world is leaning in, paying attention to you in a new way, because it is. This is the mechanism behind synchronicity, behind intuition, behind sudden breakthroughs, behind timelines opening and collapsing. Not magic, not luck, not chance. Every moment of your life is shaped by something so subtle, so automatic that you rarely notice it happening. Your assumptions, not the ones you speak out loud, not the ones you consciously believe, but the quiet, invisible expectations sitting beneath your awareness, the ones you've carried for years without ever questioning. These assumptions behave like gravitational fields. They pull reality into shapes that match their vibration. They determine what appears, what disappears, what repeats, and what refuses to enter your life no matter how badly you want it. Because the field does not respond to your words. It responds to the baseline assumptions you hold about the world. If you assume life is harsh, the field becomes dense. If you assume people cannot be trusted, the field closes. If you assume nothing works out for you, the field collapses into stagnation. And you won't even realize these assumptions are active, because they feel like truth. But the real truth is this: your assumptions are not reflections of reality. Reality is a reflection of your assumptions. The field listens to the tone beneath your awareness. That quiet, of course, this is how things go for me. Energy that runs in the background of your life. And because assumptions operate without effort, they shape reality without resistance. This is why repeating affirmations doesn't work if your foundational assumptions contradict them. You can shout, "I am abundant," but if your inner assumption whispers, "I always struggle," the field obeys the whisper, not the shout. Assumptions are the language the field understands. Assumptions are the blueprint from which your timeline is constructed. Assumptions are the frequency that the world mirrors back to you. And the most powerful part? Assumptions don't need years to change. They shift the moment the observer becomes aware of them. Because once the observer in you sees an assumption clearly, it dissolves. It loses its power instantly, like a shadow disappearing under direct light. Assumptions only survive in unconsciousness. The moment awareness touches them, the spell breaks. But here's the twist most people never realize. You don't need to replace old assumptions with new ones. You only need to return to the observer, the position within you that has no assumptions at all. When you sit in that place, in that quiet inner clarity, assumptions loosen. They fall away naturally, and without them, the field becomes open again, responsive, fluid, capable of expressing possibilities you never allowed before. In that state, reality feels like it's rewiring itself around you. People behave differently. Events unfold with precision. Opportunities appear without force. Patterns you thought were permanent begin to collapse, not because you forced change, but because the assumptions that imprisoned your life stopped holding authority. The observer doesn't assume. The observer simply watches. Time is the greatest illusion you've ever agreed to, not because it doesn't exist, but because it doesn't exist in the way you think it does. You believe time is a line, past, present, future, a sequence stretching forward, carrying you like a passenger trapped on a train you cannot leave. But in truth, time is not a line. It is a field, a simultaneous, living field of possibilities, and your observer position determines which version of time you intersect with. This is why your past feels different when your state changes, why a memory that once hurt suddenly loses its teeth, why something that once seemed impossible becomes obvious. You think the memory changed, but what changed was the observer encountering that memory. Your past is not fixed. Your future is not waiting. Both are responding to the point of awareness you occupy right now. Most people don't realize this because they're trapped in psychological time, believing their past defines them and their future threatens them. But those two only exist for the character, not for the observer. The observer is outside the timeline. It sees the past, present, and future the way you might see different rooms in a house, separate spaces you can walk into depending on where you stand. This is why a shift in consciousness doesn't just change where you're going, it changes where you came from. A new observer position rewrites the meaning of your past. And because meaning is the architecture of identity, your entire trajectory shifts. You don't escape your past. You outgrow the version of yourself that lived it. Change the observer and the past reorganizes itself. Change the observer and the future updates instantly. Change the observer and the present becomes a new doorway. Time bends around awareness. It bends around the state you're anchored in. It bends around the assumptions you've dissolved. And this is why some people feel cursed by repetition, because they walk into each moment carrying the same observer position they had yesterday, last month, last year. They unconsciously project the same timeline forward, and the field simply mirrors it back. But the moment you shift, even slightly, the entire structure of time shifts with you. Paths that were closed open, options that never existed appear. Versions of yourself you never met begin to emerge. Events reorganize as if the timeline is correcting itself to match the new observer. This isn't metaphorical. This is mechanical. The timeline you experience is not chosen by action. It's chosen by position, the elevation, clarity, and consciousness of the one observing the moment. And when you anchor yourself in the observer rather than the character, you rise above the timeline entirely. You stop being dragged by time and start navigating it. You stop being defined by the past and start reshaping it. You stop fearing the future and start selecting it. From this place, life stops being linear. Identity is the most elaborate illusion consciousness ever created. Not because it is false, but because it convinces you it is the whole truth. Your name, your memories, your preferences, your wounds, your habits, your victories, your personality, all of it feels like you, but none of it is the observer. Identity is a costume worn by awareness, a mask so convincing that awareness forgets it ever put it on. From the moment you were old enough to be told who you are, the world began constructing a character around you. You're like this. You're not like that. You always do this. You never do that. And slowly, without noticing, you began to believe the script. But the script is not the one watching. The script is not the one aware of the script. You are. Identity is an echo, a residue of experience that stuck to the surface of consciousness. It behaves like a shape carved from memory, fear, desire, expectation, and repetition. And because you've worn it for so long, you forgot it was optional. Look closely. Every version of you from the past felt real in its own time. The child you were felt real. The teenager you were felt real. The older versions of you felt real. But each one eventually dissolved, and something remained. That something is the observer. The observer has no biography. It has no fixed identity. It is the space in which identity appears and disappears. This is why every time you change, the world around you changes. Because the field doesn't respond to the character, it responds to the awareness behind the character. When awareness shifts, identity reshapes. When identity reshapes, behavior changes. When behavior changes, reality reorganizes. But here's the most extraordinary part. You don't need to force your identity to transform. You only need to return to the place within you that has no identity. From that place, old versions of you begin to fall away effortlessly. Patterns lose their grip. Habits break. Emotional triggers fade. Your entire sense of self becomes fluid, lighter, more spacious. This is the beginning of true freedom. When you realize you can step out of the character the way you step out of a room, awareness is not trapped in the identity. Identity is trapped inside awareness. And the moment you stop clinging to the character, something miraculous occurs. A deeper intelligence begins to emerge, a version of you that is not defined by fear or memory. A version of you that is not shaped by past wounds or the expectations of others. A version of you that isn't trying to become anything, because it already is everything. This is not the creation of a new identity. Your emotions become signals, not prisons. Your thoughts become movement, not truth. Your story becomes art, not fate. This is the identity the field recognizes. This is the identity reality mirrors. This is the identity that bends timelines effortlessly. There is a layer of reality so deep, so foundational, that every religion, every mystical tradition, every scientific breakthrough has circled around it without fully touching it. A layer beneath thoughts, beneath emotions, beneath identity, beneath even the idea of you. It is the field. Not a metaphorical field, not a spiritual symbol, a literal, ever-present field of consciousness that everything arises from. This is the substrate of existence, the ocean from which every wave of experience is born, the unseen architecture that holds galaxies, minds, timelines, and possibilities together. And here's the truth that shatters everything you think you know. You are not inside this field. You are made of this field. The observer within you is not a passenger moving through reality. It is a point of awareness, emerging from the same field that creates stars, cells, dreams, and thoughts. This is why the world responds to your observation. Because the observer and the observed are not two separate things. They are two movements of the same underlying consciousness. Most people experience life with the illusion of separation. I am here. The world is out there. I perceive reality. Reality behaves independently. But separation is a perceptual artifact or aside effect of looking through identity rather than through awareness. When you shift into the observer, the illusion cracks. You begin to sense the field behind every moment, a living intelligence that isn't thinking, planning, or judging, but responding, not to your words, not to your emotions, not to your desires, but to your state of being. Your state determines what level of the field you resonate with, and the level you resonate with determines what versions of reality you can access. This is why two people in the same situation can live completely different lives. One experiences chaos, the other experiences flow. Same moment, different observer position. Different observer position, different field response. The field doesn't reward good behavior. It doesn't punish bad behavior. It mirrors the frequency of awareness. When you are fragmented, you connect with a fragmented layer of the field. When you are still, you connect with a coherent layer. When you are unconscious, you connect with the densest, most limited version of the field. But when you rest in the observer, silent, clear, aware, you connect with the highest organizing intelligence the field contains. And from that place, reality stops being a struggle. It becomes orchestration. You will see events rearrange with impossible precision. You will feel yourself guided without force. You will witness opportunities timed beyond coincidence. Not because you're blessed or chosen, but because you are finally aligned with the field instead of the noise. You don't attract it. You tune into it. You are not manifesting reality. You are selecting it, accessing it. Perception is not passive. It is not a window you look through. It is the tool that shapes the very world you see. Most people think they observe reality. They don't. They observe the version of reality their consciousness is tuned to, and they mistake that tuned version as the truth. But perception is not a mirror. Perception is a projector. The mind doesn't wait to see the world before deciding what it means. It decides first and instantly, subconsciously, and then perception arranges the world to confirm the decision. This is why reality feels stable, consistent, predictable, until it suddenly isn't. Because perception is constantly building the world for you, not showing it to you. Your awareness is like a beam of light. Where it lands, reality forms. Where it shifts, reality rearranges. Where it withdraws, reality dissolves. Every moment, billions of sensory impressions are available, but your perception selects only the ones that match your internal state. Not because it's biased, but because it's efficient. It mirrors the observer's vibration so flawlessly that you start believing reality is that vibration. If you're angry, you see reasons to be angry. If you're hopeful, you see openings. If you're fearful, you see threats. If you're peaceful, you see clarity. Not because the world has changed, but because the observer has. Perception edits reality to match the consciousness looking through it. This is the quiet mechanism behind manifestation. Intuition, déjà vu, clarity, chaos, coincidence, and all of it. You don't create what you see what you're creating. And this is where perception becomes powerful or dangerous. Because if you forget you are the observer, your perception becomes automatic, repetitive, conditioned. It begins to recycle the same emotional signatures, the same assumptions, the same fears, the same identity loops, and the field simply mirrors them back, creating the illusion that you're stuck, but you're not stuck. Your awareness is simply positioned in a part of the field that reflects limitation. Shift the observer and perception shifts. Shift perception and reality changes shape instantly. This is why breakthroughs feel sudden. Why insights appear out of nowhere. Why a life that felt impossible becomes obvious in one moment of clarity. Because perception cracked open and revealed a higher layer of the field. Perception is the interface between the observer and the world. It translates inner vibration into outer experience. It selects one version of reality over infinite others. The moment you understand that perception is active, not passive, creative, not reflective, everything changes. You stop trying to fight circumstances. You stop trying to manipulate outcomes. You stop trying to control the external world. Instead, you shift the observer. You shift the state. You shift the level of consciousness. And perception automatically rebuilds reality around you. There comes a point in this process where something subtle but unmistakable begins to happen. You don't visualize reality anymore. You don't wish for outcomes. You don't even command anything. Instead, reality begins to anticipate you. The field shifts from being something you study to something that studies you back. And this is the moment most people never reach because they're too busy forcing things instead of observing correctly. But once you cross that threshold, the fabric around you develops a strange responsiveness, like it's waiting for your next internal signal. At this stage, your observation is no longer passive. It becomes a frequency signature, a kind of scalar imprint that emanates from you independent of effort or intention. You think less, but more happens. You do less, but more aligns. You stop trying to manifest and start noticing that outcomes rearrange themselves around your energy configuration. People call it luck. Some call it divine alignment. But the truth is simpler and far more powerful. Your observer state has stabilized enough that the field treats your internal position as a primary reference point. You'll notice small things first. Coincidences that sync too tightly to ignore. Conversations that go exactly where you needed them to. Obstacles dissolving before you even face them. But these are not signs, they're feedback loops. They tell you that the reality matrix around you has accepted the new baseline of your being. Your energetic signature is no longer a ripple. It is the center of orientation. And once this shift happens, even your silence becomes a command. Your stillness becomes influence. Your presence becomes instruction. Because the field follows one law above all. It aligns with the strongest observer in its radius. And right now that observer is you. Not because you forced it, but because you finally understood how to be seen by the field. The more stable your awareness becomes, the more reality has no choice but to bow, rearrange, and reshape itself in accordance with your internal frequency. This is the moment where manifesting becomes obsolete because you've become the gravitational center. You stop chasing reality. Reality starts orbiting you. There is a point in this inner shift where your old identity begins to feel foreign, not broken, not destroyed, just irrelevant. The version of you that survived on overthinking, predicting, worrying, forcing, hustling, begging reality to cooperate. That version begins to dissolve quietly, like a shadow losing its source of light. People think this is the scary part. It isn't, it's the liberating part. Because when identity collapses, power finally has space to move. You start noticing that the you thought you were was never actually you. It was a configuration, an energetic posture held together by memory, fear, and repetition, a habit, not a truth. And once that false structure loosens, your awareness expands into the space it occupied. The tension slips out. The narration stops fighting. A strange silence takes over, but it's not empty. It's charged, alive, a doorway more than an absence. This collapse isn't dramatic. It's subtle, almost disappointingly quiet, like a mask falling from your face without you touching it. And the moment that mask drops, something extraordinary happens. The field stops responding to the old identity and starts responding to the raw observer behind it. The true you, the one that existed before story, before history, before limitation, steps forward without announcing itself. This is why everything becomes easier after the collapse. Not because life magically becomes simple, but because the one who struggled isn't the one observing anymore. The old identity was formed in pressure. The observer is formed in presence. The old identity fought reality. The observer perceives it. And perception is the root of influence. You feel lighter because you're no longer dragging your past into every moment. You feel clearer because noise loses its authority. You feel more stable because you're not trying to maintain a fictional version of yourself. The collapse reveals a deeper intelligence, an inner stillness that moves reality without effort. And this is the paradox. Once identity collapses, you don't become more. You become less, and that's why everything becomes possible. Less noise, less narrative, less resistance, less attachment. And in that less, the field finally has space to reveal how much you truly were capable of all along. There is a subtle but absolute line that separates people who forever chase their desires and those whose desires quietly arrange themselves around them. That line is the shift from wanting to knowing, and unless you felt it, it sounds like philosophy. But once you experience it, you realize it's the most precise energetic pivot you can make. Wanting is a state of lack. It vibrates as distance. It sends a signal into the field that says, it isn't here yet. And the field, being perfectly neutral and obedient, mirrors that exact signal back as your lived reality. So you keep wanting, and wanting, and wanting. You may visualize, affirm, script, pray, hustle. But if the underlying frequency is absence, the output is always delay. But knowing is different. Knowing is still. Knowing is heavy. Like a presence that doesn't move because it doesn't need to. Knowing has no urgency, no impatience, no friction. It doesn't negotiate with reality because it recognizes itself as the root command. When you shift into knowing, you stop generating distance. You emit completion. And reality conforms to completion far faster than it does to desire. This isn't about confidence. Confidence wavers. This isn't about hope. Hope waits. This isn't about belief. Belief can be shaken. Knowing is deeper than all of them. Knowing is the observer, locking into a timeline with such internal certainty that the field must follow the imprint. And here's the part no one teaches you. Knowing doesn't come from evidence. It comes before evidence. Evidence is just the physical world catching up to the non-physical position you already chose. The moment you shift into knowing, your internal frequency stops oscillating. It stabilizes, and that stability emits a coherent signature. Coherence bends the field. Coherence shapes timelines. Coherence collapses uncertainty into form. You'll notice that the moment you drop from wanting to knowing, the mind becomes extremely quiet, not because you forced it to be silent, but because the internal struggle that fed your thoughts is gone. The timeline has been selected, and the field recognizes the signal instantly. There is no lag inside the quantum domain. Wanting pulls reality toward you but never closes the gap. Knowing erases the gap entirely. And once you feel this shift even once, you will never chase again. Because the moment you understand how knowing feels, you realize that reality doesn't respond to desire. It responds to decision held at the frequency of certainty. This is the turning point where creation stops being effort and starts becoming identity. At this stage, something becomes unmistakably clear. The field isn't responding to what you say. It isn't responding to what you write, what you affirm, or what you pray. It responds only to the structure you hold inside your awareness. Words are surface-level vibrations. Structure is the deep architecture of your being, and the field interacts only with architecture. This is why people repeat affirmations for years, with no shift, because their internal structure contradicts the words they're speaking. The field doesn't interpret language. It interprets coherence. It reads the geometric arrangement of your internal state, the patterns of tension, the placement of your awareness, the stability of your frequency. It sees the design behind your thoughts, not the thoughts themselves. You can tell the universe, I am abundant. But if your structure is built on fear, scarcity, and survival mode tension, the field will echo that structure back no matter how loud your affirmations are. But when your structure shifts, even silently, reality shifts instantly. Because the field bends to the blueprint, not the noise layered on top of it. This is the moment where you stop relying on words and start tuning your inner architecture like an instrument. You become aware of where your energy collapses, where your awareness tightens, where your identity shrinks. You notice the distortions in your internal geometry, and instead of fighting them, you begin to reconfigure them with presence, observation, and stillness. And here's the strange part. The moment your structure aligns, your desires no longer feel like desires. They feel like inevitabilities. There is no emotional pull, no tension, no longing, only a quiet recognition that the timeline already contains your signature. The field senses this structural certainty and rearranges itself accordingly, not because you asked, but because your architecture left it no alternative. This is why the observers who master this level appear effortlessly powerful. They don't rely on force because force is unnecessary. They don't rely on rituals because rituals are symbolic. They rely on internal structure, clean, coherent, stable, and the field has no resistance to that kind of clarity. At this level, you begin to understand a deeper truth. You never needed to convince reality. You only needed to configure yourself, because the field doesn't listen to language. It listens to the geometry of your awareness. And once that geometry becomes aligned, precise, and unshakably coherent, reality has only one possible outcome. It mirrors your structure with absolute fidelity. At this stage, something becomes unmistakably clear. The field isn't responding to what you say. It isn't responding to what you write, what you affirm, or what you pray. It responds only to the structure you hold inside your awareness. Words are surface-level vibrations. Structure is the deep architecture of your being, and the field interacts only with architecture. This is why people repeat affirmations for years, with no shift, because their internal structure contradicts the words they're speaking. The field doesn't interpret language. It interprets coherence. It reads the geometric arrangement of your internal state, the patterns of tension, the placement of your awareness, the stability of your frequency. It sees the design behind your thoughts, not the thoughts themselves. You can tell the universe, I am abundant. But if your structure is built on fear, scarcity, and survival mode tension, the field will echo that structure back no matter how loud your affirmations are. But when your structure shifts, even silently, reality shifts instantly, because the field bends to the blueprint, not the noise layered on top of it. This is the moment where you stop relying on words and start tuning your inner architecture like an instrument. You become aware of where your energy collapses, where your awareness tightens, where your identity shrinks. You notice the distortions in your internal geometry, and instead of fighting them, you begin to reconfigure them with presence, observation, and stillness. And here's the strange part. The moment your structure aligns, your desires no longer feel like desires. They feel like inevitabilities. There is no emotional pull, no tension, no longing, only a quiet recognition that the timeline already contains your signature. The field senses this structural certainty and rearranges itself accordingly, not because you asked, but because your architecture left it no alternative. This is why the observers who master this level appear effortlessly powerful. They don't rely on force because force is unnecessary. They don't rely on rituals because rituals are symbolic. They rely on internal structure, clean, coherent, stable, and the field has no resistance to that kind of clarity. At this level, you begin to understand a deeper truth. You never needed to convince reality. You only needed to configure yourself, because the field doesn't listen to language. It listens to the geometry of your awareness. And once that geometry becomes aligned, precise, and unshakably coherent, reality has only one possible outcome. It mirrors your structure with absolute fidelity. There is a moment in this journey where you stop trying to speak to the universe altogether, not because you give up, but because you realize something far more powerful. Your silence communicates more clearly than your words ever could. At this stage, silence becomes a frequency, not an absence. A signal, not a void. A command, not a pause. Most people fill their reality with noise, mental noise, emotional noise, verbal noise. They talk to the field like it's deaf. They shout affirmations. They beg outcomes into existence. They script, chant, visualize, repeat. But the truth is brutally simple. The more noise, the weaker the signal. Noise is instability. Noise is uncertainty leaking through language. Noise is a declaration of doubt wearing the mask of intention. But silence. Silence is different. Silence is coherent. Silence is dense. Silence holds weight in the field. When you reach this state, your silence becomes the clearest expression of your internal blueprint, because only someone who knows can stay silent. Only someone who is completely aligned can stop explaining their desires to the universe. Only someone whose observer state is locked can move through life without announcing their next timeline. This is why ancient, esoteric systems valued stillness over ritual, because stillness reveals your true frequency without distortion. In this stage, silence isn't passive. It's the field of pure signal, undiluted by thought. Your inner silence starts bending reality because it emits only one message. It is already done, and the field recognizes this signal instantly. No lag, no negotiation, no resistance. Creation begins reorganizing itself around you because your silence leaves no gap, no contradiction, no interference pattern. It is the most stable frequency a human can emit. You'll notice something strange. People start reacting to you differently, not because you said anything new, but because your silence carries a gravitational pull. Your presence begins bending conversations. Your energy shifts rooms. You don't need to argue. You don't need to persuade. You don't need to prove anything. Your silence does the work. Your stillness does the speaking. This is also when outcomes begin forming before you consciously decide them, because the field, now attuned to your baseline frequency, preempts your desires. It's not reading your thoughts. It's reading your structure through the silence. And here lies the final truth of this stage. Silence is the signature of alignment. Silence is the mark of inner certainty. Silence is the evidence of a stabilized observer. You stop asking. You stop waiting. You stop hoping. You simply observe quietly, and reality responds loudly. There is a point where the field stops, behaving like an external environment, and starts functioning like an extension of your own internal movement. Not metaphorically, mechanically. You'll notice that situations begin shifting before you take action, as if reality is adjusting itself in anticipation of your trajectory. This is not destiny. This is alignment so precise that the field begins predicting you. At this stage, timelines reorganize themselves preemptively. Doors open without you knocking. Obstacles dissolve before you encounter them. People shift positions in your story without you requesting anything. The world, in its subtle architecture, begins clearing a path for you, not because you demanded it, but because your internal state became so stable, so coherent, that the field can calculate your next move with perfect accuracy. When the observer state reaches this level, your actions become the final step, not the initiating step. The real shift happens internally, quietly, long before anything physical manifests, and the physical world, being the slowest layer of reality, simply catches up. This is why things feel effortless. Not because life becomes easy, but because friction disappears. When there is no internal contradiction for the field to echo back, most people act to create alignment. But once you reach this level, you act because alignment is already complete. Your movements become confirmations, not attempts. You stop chasing outcomes and begin stepping into the ones already shaped by your frequency. This is the stage where intuition becomes sharper than logic. Not because intuition is mystical, but because the field sends microsignals ahead of time. You feel the pull before you know the reason. You sense the path before you see it. You navigate through resonance instead of analysis. And here's the part that feels supernatural even though it's just mechanics. Your energy becomes predictive. The field reads your stability like coordinates and adjusts the environment so your chosen timeline unfolds smoothly. You begin noticing the right people show up at the exact moment. Opportunities align without effort. Delays convert into advantages. Redirections reveal hidden routes. Coincidences become too precise to ignore. This is not luck. Luck is random. This is coherence. Coherence is systematic. The more stable your internal geometry, the more efficiently the field reorganizes itself around your trajectory. Your presence becomes a blueprint that reality follows automatically. You no longer move through life. Life moves around you. And this is the quiet power of this stage. You realize that effort is not what moves reality. Identity is not what moves reality. Desire is not what moves reality. Alignment is what moves reality. And once you're aligned, you don't push. You don't chase. You don't control. You simply step forward and find reality already waiting for you. There comes a stage where your relationship with time itself begins to shift, not because you manipulate time, but because your frequency becomes so coherent that time stops functioning as a barrier and starts functioning as a medium. Most people experience time as something rigid, linear, slow, unchangeable. But once your observer state stabilizes, you discover something radical. Time is elastic, and it bends around the clarity of your frequency. This is why results arrive faster. Why manifestations that took months start unfolding in days. Why delays vanish. Why synchronicities appear stacked, layered, cascading into each other with impossible precision. It's not that time speeds up for you. It's that your frequency stops resisting the timeline you've aligned with. And without resistance, time has no choice but to compress. At this level, past, present, and future stop feeling separate. The future timeline you choose begins leaking into the present. You'll feel glimpses, micro-sensations, subtle, already-happened impressions. This happens because your awareness is no longer confined to linear movement. Your frequency overlaps with the version of you that already exists on that timeline, and the field recognizes both versions as the same observer. This is why decisions become easier. You're no longer choosing blindly. You're choosing from connection. This is also why fear dissolves. You're not hoping things will work out. You're remembering the version of reality where they already did. Most people experience time as resistance. Every desire creates distance. Every fear slows the timeline. Every doubt fragments the trajectory. But once your frequency stabilizes, time behaves like a fluid around you. It compresses where you're aligned. It expands where you're incoherent. It reorganizes based on your internal structure. You'll notice strange phenomena. People arrive exactly when needed, down to the minute. Opportunities sync perfectly with your capacity. Delays feel intentional, as if rearranged for your benefit. Wrong timing disappears entirely. Your moves start landing with precision instead of struggle. You're not controlling time, you're harmonizing with it. Time bends because there's no longer friction between who you are internally and the timeline. You're walking externally. This is the point where your life stops feeling accidental and starts feeling architectural. You're no longer reacting to time, you're writing its geometry. And the field, reading your stabilized frequency, reorganizes temporal sequences to align with your chosen trajectory. What used to take effort now takes alignment. What used to require force now requires clarity. And this is the hidden truth. Time does not limit you. Your incoherence limits time. But once coherence becomes your baseline, time becomes obedient, flexible, responsive. Not a cage. A conduit.